Hey, everybody, and welcome to Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football show. As always, it's Carter, Ben, and Mitch here to talk all things Alabama football with you. We we all thought Alabama would cover last week. They did, and then some. The offense, I think, was as good as everybody expected it to be, and the defense was even better. So, good signs all around there. Before we go any further, I would like Mitch to stand up and model this amazing shirt he's got for everyone. Reppin' Colin Sexton.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, it's a great shirt. And it was a great shirt, and it was a great game on Saturday for all the reasons that Carter said, because they covered. And they covered in like the first, I guess not in the first quarter. They were
up by 21 at the end of the first quarter, and I think the final spread was 22.5. So this close to it.
So they came close in the first quarter. Which side of the ball do you guys want to talk about first? They were both kind of equally, maybe not equally fun, but they were both a lot of fun. We want to start with the defense, considering that the first play was like bad and that was on the defense, and maybe that's a logical starting point.
Yeah, let's go for it.
I guess we were concerned. Well, we knew that Ole Miss was going to try to hit plays down the field, especially along the boundaries. They were just going to throw it up to their wide receivers. It's what they've done in the past against Alabama. It was what they were going to do this year against Alabama, and it's what they did on the first play. And Savion just kind of didn't execute his jam, and then just got run by, and they were playing quarters to that side, so there was nobody there. It was a touchdown. And I don't even really know if there's like a ton else to say about that. He got benched because of it. So it's meaningful, not just in terms of the fact that it put 7 points on the board, but it's meaningful in that it led to some personnel changes, right? But not it just happens, right? Like, I don't really take anything significant from that.
And as far as the play itself, it just, it's kind of what we expected might happen multiple times over the course of the game. And it happened once. It happened on the first play, and then it never happened again. Which speaks pretty well all around, I think, to the Alabama defense, in particular the secondary and the pass rush, which got home kind of more than I maybe expected it to. In particular, Christian Miller, who kind of finally had that game that we all kind of hoped he might be able to have and be the impact edge rusher that Alabama really needs right now.
They had some weird protection calls. Like, Christian Miller got matched up on like a back one time against a 4-man rush when they slid to the left for no reason. And then the same thing happened with Dylan Moses. Like, there was just like some weird protection things going on. But the pass rush, I thought the pass rush was pretty good. Really just Miller and some manufactured pressure. Like, I don't really know how, like, Anthony Jennings was not particularly impactful as far as pass rush goes, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. One thing I did notice on that area, I think this people haven't talked about this a ton, but it's a thing I've noticed and maybe that other people have noticed. It seemed like, we've been talking about how amazing Quinnen Williams has been up front and how he's just been sort of an absolute, kind of a wrecking ball on the interior, but we haven't, Raekwon was really the name guy on this defensive line coming into the season, and we haven't really seen him. I don't know if he has a sack yet, or maybe he has just one or something like that. So we haven't really seen a lot of splash plays from him. But it was something I noticed, particularly in some of the plays you highlighted. It seems like Raekwon is still getting a lot of double teams. It seems like kind of the scouting report on Alabama's defensive line coming into the season was that the teams were going to want to focus on him. And so he's been like drawing a lot of double teams and stuff, which has been getting Quinnen a lot of one-on-ones. And so I wonder if, maybe it's not so much with Raekwon that he's been having a down year or has not been living up to the expectations so much as that he's been kind of drawing the attention and the other guys have been flourishing of that. And I wonder if as teams start to realize that, oh crap, Quinnen Williams is going to destroy us if we don't do something about it, that he's going to draw some more one-on-ones and maybe have sort of a, make some more splash plays.
Mitch, where do you come down on that with regards to Raekwon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear the production is not quite what we expected maybe by this point, but yeah, I think that's just a function of it's just opening up production from maybe Quinn's side. Right. And yeah, I would be interested to see if people start switching. And
I mean, I to be fair, I do feel like I do see a fair bit of time. Like when Quinn Williams is when he's just being blocked by one guy, I feel like he's routinely, shedding that block and getting into the backfield and making a play. And when Raekwon's being blocked by one guy, I feel like I just don't see it as much. Granted, he is being double teamed a fair amount. I totally agree with that. But I just don't know if he's been the impactful player that we were hoping, even when he's just being blocked by one guy. He's a very powerful player. Like when he gets double teamed, he stands up really well to the double team. He doesn't get driven off the ball. Like he two gaps extremely well. I just wonder if he's just never really going to be that. Well, that's too strong. I wonder if he's just not quite like the real explosive gap penetrator that maybe we expected him to be a little bit going into this year.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if he's just going to be like a real powerful, like space eater in the middle, sort of like an Ashawn Robinson type player, like that's fine, and then you've got Quinnen next to him, the guy who sort of is a little bit quicker and gets in the backfield more. And I would think that they would complement each other very well if that's sort of like the role that each one of them played. So, I mean, it's just been three. The other thing is like, there's all this temptation to sort of draw these, conclusions, right? Based on like what we've seen, like Quinn Williams is like a first round pick and Raekwon Davis like doesn't make splash plays. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that it's, been 3 games. And, that doesn't mean that this isn't going to continue the rest of the way. But I do think I guess I sort of see both sides, right? I do think that he's being double teamed a fair bit. And I think he's doing quite well against those double teams. But I also think that when there's opportunities for like sort of production points and splash plays, like maybe he's not quite fully taking advantage of those.
Yeah, I would see that.
And what do you guys think of Anthony? Do you think maybe like one thing that I was thinking about him is that maybe our opinion of him was colored too much by the Clemson game last year. Like he's a really good player, like a really solid player. But I was thinking that maybe he was going to be like sort of a Ryan Anderson type in terms of coming on really late in his career and going from being just sort of like a solid player who sets the edge well to somebody who's actually like a really strong and effective pass rusher. And maybe that's just not quite who he is. Well, what have you guys seen from him so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the times when people have been like, oh, he looks a step slow or stuff like that. And, I think that's been a bit overblown in the sense that really he has made he hasn't really taken over a game the way he did. I think you're essentially right in that we may have allowed the Clemson game to sort of color our expectations for him too much. He had shown nothing up to that point to indicate that was the kind of player he was going to be game in and game out.
Right.
So I don't know. We'll see going forward. But I don't think he's been like a disappointment or anything like that.
I mean, we've seen that he can at least do the types of things that Ryan Anderson could do. It's just like the consistency is not there as much as it was with Ryan.
Yeah. Right. I mean, let's not forget that Ryan's best year came in 2016 when, he was a key component of one of the most disruptive Alabama defensive fronts maybe in history.
Right.
So and Anthony in 2018 doesn't have quite that
surrounding talent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I also think, I think that maybe Anthony's skill set is really conducive to to showing through the most against a team like Clemson, against kind of like an option-based run team, which is what they were with Kelly Bryant last year. Like, he's going to be unblocked, he's going to be optioned, he's going to be able to make really good decisions, he's going to be able to play instinctual against the run, stuff like that. And maybe like that's less the case against like a pass first team that's going to look to like isolate him as an edge rusher and stuff and force him to make plays to get into the backfield, to get after the quarterback. Like, maybe that's just not as much his strength, and that's sort of what Alabama's faced so far this year with Ole Miss and Louisville.
Right,
two teams who are just going to want to throw the ball a lot and going to want to force him to act as a pass rusher and beat the tackle on plays and stuff. So maybe it's just, I don't know. At some point, no, sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a really good way of thinking about it, because I think from what we've seen sort of in total, I think the best way to characterize him is as a pass rusher and as edge guy is that he's not like the guys who are outside pass rushers who tend to be the most effective guys against pure regular pass protection getting to the quarterback. You need to be really, really explosive. I mean, like, think Tim Williams, and I don't think Anthony is really that guy. So I think he will tend, it's exactly like you said, he's going to tend to excel against a team like Clemson, where he's going to have kind of more. I mean, don't forget, like, he had one sack in that Clemson. Like, he forced a fumble on a drop back attempt that wouldn't have gotten credited as a sack. But he also, like, a big part of what he did in that game was he just had like, what was it, like 3 or 4 TFLs where he was making, like where they optioned him on a run player where he just got into the backfield and made a play. So like, it wasn't like he was this overwhelming pass rush force even in that game.
Right.
And
I
like
wonder. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just say that Clemson team's a lot different than the 3 teams we've seen them play this season too.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, maybe we'll get a little bit more of an idea this week, but.
Yeah, or I was thinking maybe like when like LSU and Mississippi State rolls around, those are the kind of matchups that he could hopefully flourish in.
Particularly Mississippi State, who, this is a total aside, but like
they can't throw the ball.
Yeah, it's so weird because you look at the stat profiles on them, and I think Bill C did a whole piece on this. They are insanely efficient running the ball, which is absurd because they can't throw the ball at all. They're so bad at it. Nick Fitzgerald cannot throw the ball. And you think teams would have just been able to sell out and, at least kind of reduce the, even that they haven't played a lot of great teams so far. K-State is bad this year, but I would be really interested to see. I think their defense is going to keep them in a lot of games because Montez Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, is that the other guy? They're monsters up front on defense, but I will be interested to see if once they sort of hit the meat, once they hit the LSUs and Auburns and Alabamas, if they actually can continue to do things at all on offense.
Yeah, you very rarely see teams, especially in this league, who can remain so effective and so efficient offensively without having like any kind of passing threat. Like, for all the hand-wringing over the Jalen-led offense the last couple of years, like, that team was much more effective throwing the football than this Mississippi State team, for instance, right? And I think, like, if I'm trying to think of teams that are like extremely efficient all year running the ball, no matter their opponent, but couldn't really throw the ball, I think of like 2013 Auburn, and that's it. And I don't know if Mississippi State has that kind of potential offensively, but they are like number 5 in S&P Plus or something right now. And I mean, I know some people are saying like that they're the 3rd best team in the league, so that's interesting at least. And I think S&P Plus gives them the best chance to beat Alabama of all their remaining regular season opponents by like a considerable margin.
Yeah, it's something. Well, actually, I have the stat profile.
Maybe it's like 70. It's like 70%, and nobody else is even better than 80. Or I'm sorry, like Alabama's chances of winning are like 70%, and nobody else's chances are, or their chances are like 85% or better against everybody else, including Auburn and LSU.
Yeah. Remaining games for Alabama: 85% A&M, 100% Louisiana, 97% Arkansas, 93% Mizzou, 92% Tennessee, 85% LSU, 70% Mississippi State, 100% the Citadel, 86% Auburn.
Do you buy that?
No. But I think that could be. So there was a piece this week where Bill was looking at like the top 5 teams and their flaws,
the weaknesses. Alabama big plays.
Alabama's was like marginal rushing defense. or like rushing defense, marginal efficiency or something, which
I think it was. I thought it was marginal explosiveness.
Yeah, I thought it was focused on giving up some big plays.
Yeah, it was basically so it was big, but there was also an aspect of like they were like 28th in rushing efficiency or something, which was weird.
Okay. Oh, Alabama was 28th in rushing efficiency defense.
Yeah, right. Which might dovetail with Mississippi State being so good running the ball.
Right.
That might explain why the number is so
low in
that game.
Yeah. Should we move on to something? I mean, it's funny because like we've kind of focused on like some weird negatives maybe for the Ole Miss game and talking about like the lack of production maybe from some of the defensive linemen.
I feel like it was just kind of like resetting our expectations for a few guys, which maybe like the flip side is like the secondary. Maybe we're resetting our expectations in the other direction.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to put it because like I don't know. We had talked about this kind of going into Ole Miss and some before that, but like we were all really high on the potential of this secondary because like there's a lot of really really talented guys. It was just going to be a matter of like how long does it take them to get up to speed. They're there. They're there. Like this second. I think the secondary is already. I mean, because I think I mentioned this last week. I think top to bottom, it's one of the most talented secondaries they've ever had in terms of the 6 guys. Because there's not really like an obvious weakness. I mean, I guess you would say so like when like I know Savion got benched in sort of in nickel, basically.
Right, but he came back in and dime and played.
Yeah. So if you're still looking at your top 6 guys are Trayvon, Surtain, Savion, Shaheem, Xavier, and Deontay. Savion's probably the worst of those 6 guys, and if that's your worst player in time, yeah.
So like, what are your takeaways from this performance in terms of how instructive it is for what we're going to see going forward? Like, obviously they played super well against Ole Miss. Like, that's a given. And we can talk more about that specifically. But like, what are your takeaways in terms of what it tells us about what we're going to see? Like, are you guys like buying this as like a legitimately really good secondary?
I mean, yeah, I mean, like it's, it's still, or like, you can't, no matter how good they like, there's always volatility in college football, especially when you have as little experience as these guys do. But I think, like for Deontay, I don't think there's any like, you've got a 5-game sample on him.
I'm sold on him. I'm sold on him.
Surtain, there might be some more volatility, but I mean, Xavier McKinney had a great game. He's a guy that the staff's been high. One of those guys that you heard about, even just like casually following the program and reading practice reports. You remember hearing about last year and being like, oh, the staff really likes Xavier McKinney.
And he was the guy who was like locked in, like when the season ended and we were talking about like who, like even in like January and February, when we were talking about like who are the stars going to be next year, like we knew it was going to be Xavier McKinney, despite the fact that he had like never even played before. So that, I think that sort of speaks to how well regarded he was. So I totally agree with that.
The one I'm really happy about, and Yeah. And I had sort of been, I had been pretty high on him coming in. I was just like, we don't have a lot of proof for this, but like, I think, given the potential and given that he's one of those, Nick always, has his project guys, the athletes that he wants to turn into great defensive backs. And it usually works out pretty well. And none of those guys have been kind of the prototype that Trayvon is.
Right. He's not like a Cyrus Jones or anything. No. Like that was more of like a square peg into a round hole that they made work. But like Trayvon has like the natural ability.
And like, yeah, it's early with him, but I mean, that play he made to keep it from being tied up at 14, that was next level stuff.
Yeah, Mitch, what do you think about
it was just like we're seeing that like maybe a little bit of what we were seeing last season in terms of not quite knowing, playing the position for the first time last season.
Right.
Like some of those headaches have gone away. Plus the technique. I mean, there was one of the plays you highlighted where they were It was like a long throw down the sideline. The way he was able to stay in phase with the guy was like really impressive. In addition to like the diving stop for that. Yeah, it's just like really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he got like hit with a double move and didn't lose a step.
Right. Yeah, I've been really impressed. He transitions really well from like his crossover step into like a full sprint, which was like really helpful. Obviously last week, considering the amount of go routes that the Ole Miss receivers were running, and like he was physical. Like these guys were bigger than him at the line, and he was getting some good jams on, and he was being physical. And like one great play to watch is the first play of the game. Like obviously Savion gets beat, but on the other side at the top of the screen, like he gets a jam at the line, and then he just rides the receiver out of bounds, and that's Lodge, I think, who's like a really good receiver, obviously, and doesn't have Metcalf size, but he's still really good. And I mean, he's just like really, really, really pleased with what I'm seeing from Trayvon. So like, I'm absolutely buying him. And you had mentioned Deontay, who obviously is just superstar. I mean, there's not like a whole lot to be said about him. Like, I know I just was doing the whole it's only 3 games thing earlier, just like 10 minutes ago, but I mean, that's hard to not buy.
No, I'm going to pish posh on any sample size arguments with Deontay.
Yeah.
He's a freak.
Yeah.
Like, my goodness.
Yeah. I don't know about Chan Sharp dropping Ed Reed comparisons or whatever.
Compared him to Sean Taylor in the first tweet, and then every second it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, even the sample size issue, like these are the 3 teams that like would really stress test like his abilities at that position too, right? Like, so it's like, even if sample size is kind of an issue, like who else is really going to create issues for him if it isn't, these 3 teams?
I think that's a good point, right? It's not like he's an edge player going up against like just inferior, like physically inferior tackles or something compared to what he would see against better teams. Like, we're just really judging his ability to play zone coverage in the back end, anticipate throws, break on ball, show off his range, ball skills, whatever, things like that. So I agree. Like, I'm not just like, if anything, like, because of the competition, you really like what you've seen from him so far. Like, I totally agree with that. He just does everything well. Like, obviously his best attribute is that he can just play center field and just lock down the entire middle of the field. And he's got like sideline to sideline range, very similar to like Ha. But like, he plays quarter so well. It comes up, defends the run. Like, it's like he shot out of a cannon coming up. Like, he'll line up like 8 to 10 yards off the ball, and he'll be up executing his run fill, in the blink of an eye. And he can play man up underneath. I'm also impressed with McKinney's ability to play man coverage underneath when they bump him up. Everything they're doing is predicated on the safeties, and I thought, like, Saban said after the game that because of how much Ole Miss wants to go down the field, like, they obviously, like, we talked about how, and everybody talks about how Ole Miss was going to try to hit big plays, and obviously Alabama knew that too. So preventing that was a huge part of the game plan. And Saban said afterwards that they played a lot of split safeties in order to help sort of mitigate that. But they played a lot of split safeties, but they didn't play a lot of cover 2. They played a lot of
cover 6, didn't they?
They played a lot of cover 6 and a lot of cover 3. So they they would show split safeties, but it's not like they were playing like deep halves and taking everything away. So I thought they did a good job disguising coverages, moving guys around, setting traps underneath for Ta'amu. And then so he wouldn't really have a feel pre-snap for what he was going to see down the field on which side. So, and the safeties are just so athletic. Like, you could line up with split safeties, both 10, 11 yards off the ball, and then you can play cover 3 and the rotation won't even start until after the snap. But, McKinney's down there in his curl flat in cover 3, just like that. So many safeties, like, they're not going to be able to get down there as quickly and be a factor in the play. But Alabama can basically have these guys hold their ground until the very last second. So it just shows you how, not just how good these 2 guys are, but how I think everything that they want to do defensively sort of revolves around what the safeties can give you. And I mean, and that starts with Deontay, who's just, you play him single high safety and he just locks down the whole middle part of the field. It's pretty amazing.
And it's nuts with him. And this is reiterating some stuff we really said last week, but great center field safeties generally play like offensive line type roles, and that if they're doing their job right, you kind of forget about them because the main thing to do is just erase portions of the field. Like you're not. It's like when you have a guy playing zero tech in a 3-4, you're not supposed to like see that guy making splash plays.
Right.
But Deontay, and that's where obviously Ed Reed is a little over the top, but that's the kind of thing you think about, right? Like that's when you think about a guy that is playing a position that doesn't necessarily lend itself to making a bunch of big noticeable plays, but he still does. Then that's that's really impressive, and it also lets you do like they can, against teams that run the ball well, they can really play as much cover 3 as they want this year.
Right.
I mean, it makes me think a lot about like, okay, a way to test whether someone actually knows what they're talking about, if they like watch the NFL, is you ask them when the Legion of Boom was at its best, like who was the most important player in that secondary?
It's Earl Thomas, yeah.
Because I mean, literally the Seahawks in that era, they just played a whole bunch of cover 3.
Right.
They just each of the corners played a side and Earl Thomas played the middle. And that was why they were so good, because they just kept it as simple as possible. And they just had Earl Thomas stopping everything basically. And I know, we've talked about before how Saban is not one to sort of wholesale change his philosophy. So it's not like they're going to do that, but against option teams and teams that are going to spread you out and try to throw a lot of stuff underneath against you. Like, if Surtain keeps developing and Trayvon is as good as we think, and Deontay being Deontay, it's going to be really tough to like dink and dunk against this Alabama team, because they're going to be so good on the back end that they can really play as aggressively as they want against both the run game and the short passing game.
Yeah. What did you guys think of Surtain quickly? Kind of for like a last point on the defense. I thought he was okay. I thought he kind of got beat a couple times. He got beat deep once, and Ta'amu overshot the receiver, and then he gave up a couple comeback routes that were dropped. So like I didn't think it was like a great performance, but like you can see like he's coming around, I guess. I don't know. Like I don't know if he gave up like a single catch, but I don't know if that was truly reflective of how well he actually played. But obviously like just getting him that experience is a positive on its own right. So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm really excited about the secondary, honestly. Like I think it's hard not to. It's hard not to feel really good. Do you guys want to move on to the offense?
Yep.
Offense was good.
Really good. Yep.
What were some of your guys like major impressions about the offensive performance?
Man, I don't know. Everything worked.
My biggest, it was a lot of like, more of what we'd seen before. I'm glad to see like Irv is as consistent a playmaker as he's kind of becoming, because that could really open up some other things for this offense.
Yeah. Irv was that's kind of a thing. Like in terms of things that were unanticipated coming into the year, I didn't know that he was going to be this sort of threat in the passing game. But I mean, it's not just like underneath stuff. Like, we figured he could be sort of a factor in the underneath passing game, but he's getting like vertical down the field, and they're calling like a lot of plays for him where he's the primary, like, I mean, they're running like especially like on corner routes and stuff coming out from that inline tight end position. Like they're really involving him in the passing game in a very significant way. Do you guys think like, is he, I don't know, like, is this like, is he like a legitimate NFL tight end? I mean, he looks like it right now, but
I think he's got the athleticism for sure. And, I think it's just one of those things for them where, they have so many different playmakers that draw so much attention. When you're forced to defend a guy like Irv with a linebacker, and, we've talked before about the kind of RPOs you can design, especially now that they have, that they are really centering the offense around those, and there's so many you can run at so many different levels. You can do a lot of damage around stuff that's, you pair inside zone or even power with seam routes for the tight ends. And it's those, when executed properly, are nearly impossible to defend if you've got a good playmaker at the tight end position. And so he's sort of given them that dimension.
Yeah. Yeah. Carter, what else, what was one of your big takeaways from the offense on Saturday, aside from Irv?
I don't know, because it was kind of like, I don't think there was a lot of stuff that like changed my perception at all. It was really like, wow, that was exactly as good as I was expecting. There was and this is not, I mean, this is a Jalen thing. One, I was sad that Jalen didn't keep his crimson socks from the first two games. Maybe he only wants to do that with the crimson jersey. Maybe it's a jersey matches the socks kind of thing. But
was he in white socks on Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it is. Yeah.
But that touchdown pass he threw to Judy, where he just dropped it in the bread basket. First, beautiful throw, but the camera work on it was terrible. So it looked like he had been going for an underneath route, and I was like, "Oh my God, Jalen, what are you doing?" And then the ball dropped in, and I was like, "Oh."
Yeah. I what did you guys think of? I mean, that's probably not like the primary story here, but like, what did you guys think of Jalen? I one bad pick, but otherwise pretty good, right?
Even the pick, I was like glad he was being sort of aggressive.
Trying to take chances. Yeah.
I think that's good for his development.
Yeah. The couple interesting things that I had noted. I thought there was more of an emphasis on getting the ball down the field in the passing game on Saturday against Ole Miss than there had been in previous games. There was 4 in the first 2 games combined. There were 4 attempts of throws where the ball traveled 20 yards or more beyond the line of scrimmage in the first 2 games combined. Just on Saturday against Ole Miss, there was 4 of them. So they matched. So they matched the total, and there was more plays than that designed for the ball to be throwing 20 or more yards. That for whatever reason, it didn't end up throwing it because nobody was open. But so I thought there was more of an emphasis on getting vertical, and a lot of that, like early in the game, a lot of it was attacking outside the numbers. They were like some corner routes to Irv, or they tried a smash route to Judy. They also tried like a screen and go at one point that Tua had to come off of because there was pressure. So they were getting outside the numbers, and then I think it seemed like that was the strategy early, and then they were going to use that to sort of force Ole Miss into more of like a split safety cover 2 look, and then they were going to try to attack down the field more, like between the numbers, between the hashes. And you saw that on, I think it was their second to last drive, when Tua had Judy for what should have been a touchdown right down the seam off a play action. And it was like, it wasn't the best throw, but it still should have been caught. Or not Judy, I'm sorry, Irv. They had Irv down the middle.
Yeah.
So I think that
it was kind of a low throw that he couldn't, but yeah.
Right. So I think like if it would have been interesting to see, like if the game had remained closer and Tua had remained in, I think you could sort of see where the game plan was going in terms of attacking vertically on the outsides initially, and then the attacks were going to be more focused down the middle of the field. So I thought that was interesting. We kind of figured, I was looking at the plot of all Tua's throws from the first 2 games that was posted. I think it was like College Football Film Room, and obviously there was all of them were underneath. It was just very efficient in the underneath part of the field, mostly like 10 or 15 yards and in. And we talked about how that was really going to set up what they were going to do vertically. And I think you started to see some of that sort of flowing into the offense. The other thing I wanted to get your guys' take on is, one thing that was pretty clear to me against Ole Miss is they're still kind of limiting to at the line of scrimmage as far as changing plays and checking in and out of plays. There was 3 or 4 times in the second quarter alone where it was kind of obvious that they shouldn't have been running the ball because it was like a stack box, and it was pretty obvious that it wasn't the right call to run the ball. Obviously, he doesn't have the freedom right now to check out of that. So I was just wondering kind of what you guys think about that. He also doesn't seem to be checking into runs from passes. So it really seems to be a limit on what he can do at the line of scrimmage. So I just wanted your guys' thoughts on that generally.
I don't know. It's sort of odd, right? And it may be just a thing where that is something, because again, I mean, you think about this, still a pretty limited number of snaps overall that he's taken in his career, and it may be just something where they want to ease him into doing that. It would surprise me that if that was something that they're not doing because they don't think he's capable of it, because with his ability to see the field, like everything that we know about him and how he processes the game, it would be a shock to me if he was not capable of making even, just the simple checks. Like, no one, expect him to go out there and beat Peyton Manning at the line, but like, it would shock me if, just like, he's got to be able to, like, based on box numbers, be able to recognize like, oh, we should check out of a run on this one or something like that. So, it may just be a thing where they haven't, they've been so dominant on offense through 3 games that they're just being like, let's, no reason to add sort of needless wrinkles or extra moving parts to this.
Yeah. Mitch, what do you think about that?
Yeah, there's kind of like 3 factors for me in this. One of them is Tua, and that it's his first year as the true starter, and maybe
only his 3rd game starting, which I think probably gets lost in the conversation.
Yeah, and like if and to some degree he wasn't the known starter coming into like he wasn't treated as the one maybe throughout all of practice, at least to the viewing period. Another factor is like Carter mentioned, like they're just, I don't know how necessary any of it is this point in the season. And also it's Loxley's first year, at least with this team, calling plays. I mean, so I don't know how much like the new coordinators play into that as well. So I don't know. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how quickly they start to implement that, because it's not like it's something they're never going to start adopting.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, I mean, it's going to be there at some point. They're not, I wouldn't think that they're going to play LSU in November and not be checking out of plays at the line of scrimmage. Like, that would really surprise me. And I sort of agree. Like, while I do buy the argument that it still is his first year, it's his 3rd start, he's such a good decision maker just in general that I kind of feel like, I kind of agree with Carter that I don't really see it as like a capability issue. That doesn't necessarily mean that a slower, like what Mitch was saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that a slower build isn't appropriate. But I have a hard time believing that he's not sort of like capable of making those decisions. So I would think that maybe they're just sort of working it in. And maybe, somebody made the point to me on Twitter, which is probably fair too, that maybe they don't want to show teams yet what their natural checks would be. Like, what is their checks going to be against like a stack box press man across, like what's going to be their go-to checks.
I think that's probably as big a reason as any. Like, they have been so absolutely dominant so far. It's kind of to the point where, like, why put more on film than you have to? Like, even something as small as that, like, oh, when it's a light box, they check to inside zone or something. Like, it's like, something that's not like a huge thing that you give away, but like, if you can be as amazing as they've been and still have opposing defensive coordinators tearing their hair out because, you're the starting quarterback only has 45 passes on tape, like, and that goes along with what, Saban is a notorious, one of those guys that really withholds information past the point of it being useful. So it wouldn't shock me that, like, if there's any small advantage they think they can gain by keeping that stuff off tape, then that would be part of why they're doing it.
Yeah, I would agree. The other thing I wanted to talk about with the offense, and this was something that I really came away from Saturday's game excited about, is just the dimension that Judy gives them playing out of the slot. Saban talked about this after the game too, about running, what it means to have him running those verticals out of the slot. And, we were texting a little bit about it too over the last couple of days about how Alabama's never really had this kind of slot receiver. Like, in order to get this kind of production out of the slot, they would have to take people like Ridley or Cooper and move them into the slot, which they did. But now, like, they don't need to move anybody around. They're not giving up anything on the outsides. Like you move 2015 Ridley into the slot, and now Richard Mullaney is playing on the outside, and there's not a lot of concern about Richard Mullaney on the outside, right? But now, like, you've got Judy in the slot, and then you still got the big receivers on the outsides to worry about, and he's just deadly out of the slot. And you think, like, okay, so now we've seen we saw how productive he can be in like the quick game, right? Like the first couple of weeks, we saw him with a lot of slants and all he could, and everything that he was doing with like the run after the catch. And then you saw him catch a vertical for a touchdown against Louisville. And now we saw him catch a couple verticals. I think we saw him catch 3 verticals against Ole Miss. So you're just seeing, like,
he had 3 catches for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns against Ole Miss.
Yeah. And it would have been 3 touchdowns if he hadn't stepped out of bounds on that that other one, right?
That was a neat little move. I wanted somebody to do a little like fine of that set to bad or something.
He's so good. Right? Like, he's so quick twitch, like maybe like the most quick twitch player they have on the offense. So quick thing here. In 2014, Amari Cooper caught, I think it was 16. Jerry Jeudy has 6 through 3 games. Does he break that record this year? You said 17.
16. Coop had 16 in 2014.
In 14 games, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully Alabama plays 15 games this year.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, that hopefully Jeudy has extra game to do it. I don't know. That's crazy that he already has 6 touchdowns, right?
Actually, okay. There's this website I look at. It's very like, it looks like someone built this website in like 2002. But it's still up and it's still updated quite regularly. It's called prideofthetide.com. And it's actually my go-to for like, because they have just like a record section that gives you like passing, rushing, and receiving records for Alabama for career, season, and game. And it's a really nice like quick reference for that. Judy's 6 touchdowns on the season is already good for a tie for 14th all time in Alabama receiving touchdowns.
It's a new era.
There have been 3 times in Alabama history when a receiver has caught 10 or more touchdowns in a season. Amari Cooper in 2014, Amari Cooper in 2012 with 16 and 11, and then a guy named Al Larry who caught 10 in 1950.
What was Calvin's most?
7, it looks like, in 2015.
God, so Judy's already 1 away from Calvin's from Calvin's career high. Mitch, what do you think? You think he breaks?
I don't know I feel like it's gonna be close
because he's not going to get the volume, right? Like, he's not even going to get like remotely close to the volume of targets. Like, I think I was seeing. Let me pull this up on Alabama's advanced stats profile, but I'm pretty sure, like, I think he leads the team in targets, but it might only be with like 14 or something. Yeah. So, So here are the targets for Alabama this year. Judy and Devontae Smith are tied for the team lead with 14 each. Irv Smith has 13. Ruggs has 11. Waddle has 8. So, and like, I feel like that's pretty instructive as far as what we're going to see going forward, right? Like, I think it's going to be a real equal distribution. I can see Ruggs falling maybe behind Judy and Smith a little bit, and maybe Irv isn't going to get quite this many targets as the whole season goes on. But just generally, I think it's going to be pretty bunched, right?
Yeah. I mean, like for Judy to do this, which I think is, he only needs to average just less than a touchdown catch per game to do it. Assuming that, even if they play 13 games, that's, he's got 10 more and already is, 10 away from the record. But the touchdown percentage there would be insane because I mean, Coop caught 16 on 124 receptions in
124.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Oh yeah, it's the next most catches in a single season in Alabama history is Calvin with 89 in 2015.
That is unbelievable. I mean, they were like, thinking back, like they were just throwing it to him on every play. They were just like throwing like screen passes, so he was like compiling. Like he compiled like 5 receptions a game just on like smoke screens and stuff.
He had like 3 games that season with 10 plus catches.
Judy has 14 targets. So on almost 50% of his targets, he has a touchdown. And on more than 50% of his 11 receptions, he has a touchdown. And I'm trying to think like how many. I'm trying to think of his 6 touchdowns. So 3 of them have been on deep balls. 1 against Louisville was on a deep ball. 2 against Ole Miss were on deep balls. The Louisville one, the first Louisville one was on the play where Tua avoided the rusher and threw it to him in the corner. Then he took the slant against Arkansas State. So I'm missing 1. Yeah. There's 1 that I can't remember. It must have been against Arkansas State.
Yeah, I mean he's had 2 in every game so far.
Okay, so I can't remember his
2.
I'm forgetting his other one against Arkansas State. But like it's a lot of like clearly it's a big plays, and I don't know, like that feels kind of fluky a little bit, and I don't know if Judy's going to be quite like the red zone target that Coop was, No. So if the amount of big plays isn't sustainable, which it probably not, then I feel like the touchdown totals might dwindle a little bit.
Oh, the rate is definitely unsustainable. I mean, he's on pace for 30 in a 15-game
season. Right. But I mean, he's not like he could go the next 3 or 4 or 5 games without having a big play touchdown. He probably won't go the next 3 or 4 or 5 games without having a touchdown. But like, so many of his touchdowns have been on big plays, and typically like that seems kind of unsustainable. Like Coop got like a whole bunch of red zone touchdowns that year, and I don't know. Like Judy's not even really being targeted in the red zone, right? That much. So
the other touchdown in Arkansas State was the one from Jalen.
Okay. So what was the play again? Because I can't.
The one where he was like getting hit and threw the 7-yard.
Yeah, that one was in the red zone.
Oh, a short one, right? It was like a little slant or something. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that was So a couple red zone ones because he had one against Louisville too. But I'm really excited. Like, I mean, I almost feel like they could stand to get Judy a higher volume of targets, because one thing that I think that they could do a little bit more of is maybe like spread it out and have this be like I don't know, like think back to like those Clemson teams with Watson and when they had like Renfro and Leggett, and when they got into 11 personnel, but they flexed Leggett out and they went in those 3-by-1 sets, and they had Renfro in the slot closest to the line of scrimmage in the number 3 position, and they just had him run like a lot of little short routes, and they got him matched up with linebackers or safeties and stuff, and he was just torching guys. I feel like Judy could do more of that, and that Alabama might be smart to like go into those sort of empty and 3-by-1 sets a little bit more, where they get Irv Smith, flexed out, which they haven't done a ton of, right? Like mostly Irv is lined up in line, and I feel like he's athletic enough where it could be justified to sort of start flexing him out more, and then that would improve Judy's space potentially. So, I don't know. And if he starts getting more targets, then who knows? So we'll see. But it's like he just like we were saying before, like he just adds this dynamic that they've never had before. And that's really, that alone is really exciting. And then obviously it helps that they have the kind of quarterback who's going to deliver him the ball. And we haven't talked about Tua here. It's probably not even necessary to chat that much about Tua.
I mean, that's the sort of thing I was thinking about when, we first started talking about the offense, and it was like, I don't know if I have a whole lot to say, because I was really talking about Tua right there. Like, there's nothing to say about Tua because he was exactly as good as we've come to expect. And I don't think we saw anything from him that we didn't expect to see.
Yeah, I really like the touchdown the touchdown that he threw to Judy off that on that third down. Like, I'm not even sure that the ball was designed to go to Judy. And I feel like Tua just recognized pre-snap that he was probably going to be open running that go route out of the slot, and he just delivered him the ball. So I don't know. He's great.
Well, because Ole Miss was trying to disguise the coverage on that when they like lined up everybody out on the line.
It was so obvious they were going to bail out, but they weren't going to be able to bail out in time to get on top of that go route.
You can't put your whole defense within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage and expect to bail out in time to get over the top of Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Really excited about Tua. I feel like there's not a ton to say. It's funny because like he didn't even seem like the story on Saturday, but then I saw PFF had him graded as easily the best Alabama player. He was like well over, his grade was like 92 and change. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, ESPN's QBR, their like holistic metric that goes on a 1 to 100 scale, like opponent adjusted, he's at like a 98.5, which is easily tops in the country. I think Kyler Murray is second with like a 92 or something, and that's a full like Baker Mayfield's last season when he won the Heisman and set the record for NCAA passer rating, which is a different thing, also different from NFL passer rating. These things all get very confused, but Baker Mayfield last year set the record for NCAA passer rating and won the Heisman, and his QBR was like 92.
That's exciting. Yeah. So Tua is good. He's a good player.
Surprise.
And we're blessed to have all the talent around him. That all like the receivers that we have with them, like the offensive line. I don't know. I'm just so happy.
It's like a flaw. It's like kind of flawless.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, what more would you even want? You want like a bigger receiver, maybe, like on the outside.
Yeah, you could maybe like
if Shavers was ready to really give you a lot of stats.
Like imagine you turned Henry Ruggs into Julio or something like that.
I would sign up for that. I would take that.
Yeah, I mean that's basically like, because that's the thing. They have a lot of great receivers on this team, but none of them are like a prototype. Like an AJ Brown type.
Right. But the only weakness is, I mean, right guard like Leatherwood's still coming around, so I guess that's really like the only sort of like marginal weakness, I guess, that they have. But even that's kind of insignificant, and I don't think it will be an issue, like a season-long issue. So it's kind of like the perfect offense, I feel like. I don't know. Like, is it better than like Oklahoma's offense last year? Like, I kind of think it is.
Yeah, I mean, they're but like,
I don't know.
We can quibble about whether you would take last year Baker Mayfield over Tua right now. Like, I feel bound to say I'd take Baker just on body of work, but like, if I had to bet on Tua ending up better than Baker, like I probably would take those odds, right?
Me too. I would, yeah.
And I mean, they're basically better at every other position.
Yeah.
Than Oklahoma was last year.
They're so good. I can't.
I mean, I guess like, no offense to Locks, I would take Lincoln Riley as a play caller.
Yeah.
But
this is like this is kind of what we always said, right? Like, the one thing that Alabama doesn't have that levels the playing field is that they don't have the quarterback, right? So when they play these teams, in these big games, like very often the other team is the one that has the better quarterback. Like, obviously the two biggest examples of that are Clemson, and I think I actually thought that those Clemson games in a sense spoke to how good Alabama really was, because despite the fact that Clemson's quarterback at the most important position was so much better than Alabama's quarterback, those games were basically like a even matchup overall, right? And that was with a huge disparity at the most important position. So it's been so clear, and we're not saying anything all that novel here, but it's just like, Alabama has always been so much better than everybody else.
Yeah, and I think your point's made even more based on last year's Clemson game too, when the disparity wasn't there.
Right. And they just dominated them. Exactly.
Yep.
And now like the one thing that teams had over Alabama, they don't have.
Yep.
I mean, they still have a kicker, maybe.
Well, yeah, maybe. Maybe. But you know, I don't know. We were talking on Saturday about like what are the classes, you know, in college football. And is it like, you know, people talking about like the big four, right? Like Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, and Ohio State. I don't, at the very least, I don't think that all of those teams belong in the same class. And then maybe like Alabama and Georgia belong in the same class, you know. And I know on podcasting Play Nobody, Godfrey said that he thinks like it's 1A and 1B. I don't really think so. I think it's one, and then the rest of them are numbers lower than one, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. This team just seems so head and shoulders. Like even not even thinking about comparing them to other teams around the country, but just comparing them to past Bama teams. Like this team is much better than any previous Alabama team, in my opinion.
Yeah, like it's early, but that it would shock me. And especially now that, you know, we talk so much about how, oh no, looks like the secondary is great. You know, they don't have the dominant front seven that maybe the 2016 team had, but they've got a good enough defense that it's still like up to the Alabama standard, I think. And this offense is just worlds above anything else. Like I would be absolutely shocked if this doesn't end up considered the best Saban Alabama team to this point. I mean, you know, who knows about next year? Next year, you know, they lose some on the offensive line. They lose Damian. That's it. They get Tua and all the receivers back. But, you know, if up to this point, it would be shocking if this is not considered the best Saban Alabama team by a fairly wide margin.
And maybe the greatest team ever. But in order to be that, they have to win the next game.
Gotta go 15-0. Gotta go 15-0. Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about.
Let's talk about Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And like Texas A&M's like an interesting game too. I would say the most interesting game.
Well, they're like 12th in S&P, right? I think.
Are they that high?
I thought so. I thought that they were 12th in S&P.
Yeah,
I would say. Yeah, based on how they played against Clemson, that's probably fair.
So before we sort of dig into the matchup specifically, what did you guys think of their game against Clemson? I'm curious. Now, did you guys watch it live? Did you rewatch? I'm just generally curious about what your impressions were of that game, because it's interesting here because S&P, based on the 5 factors, actually gave Texas A&M a 60% win expectancy.
Yeah.
Or in other words, you could say that they outplayed Clemson in that game. So I'm curious though what you guys thought of the actual gameplay there.
Honestly, what it felt like to me was in the second half, Kellen Mond kind of went a little Johnny Football. Like
Johnny Football.
Yeah, like they couldn't run the ball the whole game.
Right.
They were really outmatched in the front, and really Mond wasn't making a lot of plays within the structure of the offense.
Like no plays within the structure of the offense. He wasn't making any plays within the structure of the offense. He was just throwing it up, and they were catching it. Right? I mean, don't you think they kind of got lucky a little bit to even be that to be in that game? Like he could have thrown like 4 picks.
Yeah. And that's where I think where you can, you know, see, you know, you see the post-game win expectancy. And that's where I think like, because S&P, the numbers can't see that Mond wasn't reading the field well and can't see all the defenders and is just sort of making kind of lucky play. I mean, okay, plays that he's capable. I mean, again, you know, we talked about this, like he made some of those plays against Alabama last year. So that's one of the things that I kind of liked about this game is I felt sort of vindicated because I was at that game in College Station last year, like, and I saw him make a couple of just like ridiculous plays outside the offense. But, you know, the numbers don't see that that's what he was doing. The numbers see successful pass play, successful pass play, successful
pass play. Yeah.
Yeah. So the numbers can't see that making those plays in that type of way isn't necessarily a sustainable way of running an offense.
Right. I mean, I think he's like a very naturally gifted player, and he's really good. He's a really creative player. He does such a good job when he's scrambling of keeping his eyes downfield, and he throws the ball pretty well on the run. But he might hit a couple. Well, okay. So how does this translate to the Alabama game? Because I think we're going to see like a similar version of him.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's not in 2 weeks in a new offensive system. He's not suddenly going to be in the pocket scanning the field and picking Alabama apart like on time and on schedule. So he's just going to try to play backyard football. That could work a little bit, I think.
Man, over under on Deontay Thompson picks on Saturday. I'm 1.5.
1.5. Yeah. I mean, he's throwing 3 or 4 picks. He's going to throw picks against Alabama. He just wasn't seeing defenders against Clemson. And it's amazing to me that they didn't have a single interception in that game. Because he was just plays where he just wasn't seeing guys. I mean, they legit dropped like 2 or 3 interceptions, and then they had like 3 or 4 other ones that they just missed. But I just think. So what's the strategy? Okay, so Texas A&M, like they had on the first couple drives, they scripted in some option plays, and those were option run plays, and those were
credit to Jimbo there, because that's for years it's been talked about, basically ever since after Jameis left, how detrimental to Florida State's offense it was that he was so kind of rigidly inflexible in terms of not using option plays and not simplifying the offense for younger, more inexperienced quarterbacks. And he's done that a bit for Mond, like mixing in the option plays and going with some RPOs and stuff like that. And doing the sorts of things that maybe he would still be at Florida State if he had been willing to do for James Blackman at FSU last year.
Right. And he's mixing in a little of that. And that was successful, but ultimately, like at the end of the day, there's not talented enough to run the ball against Clemson. And while the Alabama front is very different than Clemson's, like they're not as one gappy, they're not as, they're not trying to penetrate as much. Like they're still very talented. And I just don't see any way that A&M is going to be able to run the ball with any consistency against Alabama, which is why I think like Jimbo will run it enough to keep the defense honest. But ultimately it's going to come down to throwing the ball. And when it comes down to throwing the ball, they're going to take shots because they have to take shots, because that's what Jimbo's going to do, because he's going to feel outmatched and he's going to try to throw the ball down the field. And that's what he did in the second half against Clemson. He just took shot after shot after shot after shot, especially when they were between the 40s. There was like 5 first downs in a row between the 40s, spanning multiple drives, and like every single one of them it was a shot play. So that's just what he's going to do. What do you guys think about like the potential for that to be successful, that strategy to be successful against Alabama?
I mean, it might be the sort of thing that we kind of, I don't know. I just don't see it being sustainable with him being the kind of quarterback he is. And I don't know that, like, they've got some good receivers. I was actually noticing, I was like looking at the roster, looking at the receivers, and I think this is the first time like all the A&M receivers I knew are finally gone. Like Christian Kirk and stuff, and I'm looking at them like who and who and who. So they've got some pretty good guys, but like I don't know, they're not as good as Ole Miss's receivers, and Mond is kind of better at making something out of nothing, I think, than maybe Ta'amu was. So I could, like, worst case scenario is the sort of thing we were expecting maybe could happen last week, where they're he's making plays outside the X's and O's and throwing the ball downfield, and A&M receivers are just going up and winning one-on-one 50-50 balls. There might be some of that. I just don't know, like, even if like A&M being more talented on defense, although we'll talk about their particular weakness on defense dovetailing with what Alabama does well, but I just don't see them, like, Alabama's still going to put up 40 plus. I think I would be shocked, really, really shocked if they don't. And I just don't see what Kellen Mond did against Clemson as being sustainable. I mean, he still only scored 26 against Clemson. So like, I don't see that as being sustainable enough to actually put up the amount of points you need to beat Alabama this year.
Right. Mitch, what do you think about the challenges that sort of offense presents against Alabama? And what about some of the things that Alabama needs to do specifically in order to sort of like scheme for this stuff?
The scheme part is probably the interesting thing, right? Because I feel like this offense is somewhere in between the Ole Miss offense and the Louisville offense, right? So they may present challenges in scheme the way that Louisville did with talent that might be closer to what Ole Miss had.
Okay, that's interesting.
But in terms of like the strategy of taking shots and making plays outside the X's and O's. I mean, that's historically been pretty much the only way for teams like Texas A&M to beat Alabama. Right. So I feel like that's what you have to do.
Right. So I think, So I think that one of the things that maybe similar to the Ole Miss strategy of trying to throw the ball down the field and make big plays. A&M is going to employ a similar strategy. The difference maybe is that the plays are not going to be there's going to be some shots along the boundaries, but they're not going to be as much along the boundary as Ole Miss is, because they just, like Carter talked about, they don't have those receivers. Like, they don't have the AJ Browns and they don't have the DJ Metcalfs. And, a lot of the shots that they were taking against Clemson sort of were focused on the middle of the field. And I don't think shot throws to the middle of the field against Alabama is as likely to be successful because of just who Alabama has back there, So I think that's a potential issue for them. And I do think that they'll try to throw the ball sort of, down the field along the boundary too, but I just don't know if that's going to be as successful either, just because I don't think that they have the receivers, necessarily to compete in the same way that Ole Miss had. So I think like I don't think Alabama needs to do anything like play split safeties in this game. I think they can just sort of play their game and play a lot of cover three. Play a lot of cover three. This is really where, like, you play a lot of cover three. You trust Deontay Thompson to take care of the entire deep middle of the field and just shut down everything, over the top of the deep. And then you can just sort of play underneath and contest the short stuff. And I think this game kind of plays into Alabama's hands. The biggest concern for me is Mon, getting outside the pocket when the play breaks down, making plays. Like, they did such a good job of that against Clemson, where he was so elusive and creative with his legs, buying more time, keeping his eyes downfield. His receivers kept working to get open even after their routes were finished. So I think that's really the only concerning thing here. So I think there needs to be a real emphasis for Alabama on keeping him inside the pocket.
Definitely a keep your lanes game for the rushers.
Right. Do you guys think maybe we'll see more of like Anthony Jennings and Christian Miller at the same time here in order to get a little bit more athletic on the edges? Instead of because this is a game where like Isaiah Buggs, who's been a good player for them, but like he's not quite as athletic at the edge position. And maybe that's the kind of guy who, you're a little bit more worried about him being able to keep his lane as opposed to one of the faster and more athletic edge players. So maybe you can get the two outside linebackers in there a little bit.
Yeah. And I also think you can, because it's like, this is not, I don't know, A&M doesn't really have a dominant offensive line, and they are apparently going to be missing their center for this game.
Well, I was curious about that. I know that's McCoy, right? And I know that he was injured. I don't know what the latest was on that. I know that they feared it was like an ACL thing, but then the latest they found out that it kind of wasn't. Let's see if we quickly Google him and see what we got.
Their backup center got arrested for reckless driving and evading arrest today.
Oh.
This is from the Dallas News like 7 hours ago.
Okay, well that's problematic for them, especially if McCoy can't go. Trying to, Jimbo is uh, yeah, Texas A&M football, right? We call him. He's listed as the backup. Yeah, I'm seeing that on Twitter as well.
I don't know. Let me see if I can find anything on Twitter.
Yeah.
Eric McCoy.
I mean, that would be really bad for them, obviously. Well, Carter looks for that. I also think that, I think that Alabama's going to have to spy Mond a little bit here, with like Dylan Moses or Mac Wilson or something. Like, I think that there's going to be an emphasis on spying him just because, again, like, where this game could get messy is if he's just going crazy and making Johnny football plays outside the X's and O's with his legs. And I think one of the best ways to prevent that is just to spy him. And I think this is the kind of game where you can afford to sort of take a guy out of coverage and use him as a spy because you're not as concerned with Mon sitting in the pocket and picking you apart.
Yeah. Texag says Jimbo Fisher said on Tuesday that McCoy was expected to play. So okay, they'll have the starting center back, but the point I was their strength is really in the middle of the offensive line.
Left tackle.
The left tackle in particular had a rough. I mean, granted, everyone's going to have a rough time against Clemson's front.
Yeah,
but both of their tackles are former 3-stars. They're not the most talented guys on the team. So I would worry, less about playing outside linebackers more on standard downs, just because I would not be as worried about them getting really beat in the run game against those guys as you might against like elite tackles.
Yeah, I agree. So so that'll sort of give you an opportunity maybe to play your lighter, more athletic players, right? So because you're not as worried about getting like dominated in the run game, not as worried about those guys getting pushed around and like running behind the tackles. I mean, we'll get to score predictions in a little bit, but I guess what I'm thinking is this: it wouldn't surprise me if it was just a disaster for A&M offensively.
Yeah.
Because I feel like everything they're going to try to do is going to be super low percentage. And they're going to, and a lot of times the attempts to do those things in low percentage will end up being within plays that go outside of the offense. And while that might work a few times, I think more often than not, it's not going to work. And those sorts of plays can end up being like really disastrous. Or put another way, like, I think there's a much better chance that they score like 3 points than that they score in the mid-20s, for instance.
Yeah, I would be shocked if they score more than 20, honestly.
Yeah. I think they're going to have a real tough day defensive or offensively. What do we think about their defense? Carter, I know there was a particular line of statistics that you wanted to highlight about the Ole Miss defense.
Yeah, I haven't watched them real closely, so I can't give you any particular schematic stuff or any strong scouting reports on any players, but they give up big plays a lot. So let me give you all their various explosiveness numbers. Overall, ISO PVP, that's Bill Connolly's like general explosiveness metric, isolated points per play. It measures basically how big are your successful plays. Their defense, 126th in the country. Marginal explosiveness, which is the marginal stats are like comparing the expected, success rate or explosiveness for the down and distance and like the situation you're in.
For your own team or for like in a context neutral situation?
I think it's context neutral.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like how much more or less explosive or efficient were you than you would be expected to be based on the down and distance. So 126th in marginal explosiveness, rushing marginal explosiveness, 100th, standard down marginal explosiveness, 121st, passing marginal explosiveness, 128th, passing downs marginal explosiveness, 128th. So given and let's check Alabama's offensive numbers. Just for fun. Alabama is the 9th in explosiveness, 8th in marginal explosiveness, only 70th in rushing marginal explosiveness, which I think dovetails with what we've kind of seen. 45th in standard downs marginal explosiveness, 6th in passing marginal explosiveness, 1st in passing downs marginal explosiveness.
Yeah. And it would be better if Tua was playing more. Like those explosive numbers would be better if he was playing more.
And those all those stats are adjusted for garbage time, but actually like I think Bill upped his definitions of what garbage time is. So like in the first quarter, you now have to be up by like 40 points for it to be considered garbage time. And like the thresholds used to be much smaller. Like it used to be like 20 something points in the first quarter, and it was down to like 17 or something like that in the fourth. And now those definitions are much bigger.
Okay. So there was so then there was
still a fair amount of Jalen snaps
happening in non-garbage time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Gotcha. So yeah. And just watching them play against Clemson, it kind of makes sense. So those numbers kind of make sense, aside from the fact that they gave up big plays against Clemson. So it makes sense on that level. But in terms of like why they gave up big plays, they're very aggressive defensively. They were very aggressive against Clemson defensively. Again, just trying to take chances in a game where they knew that they were a little bit overmatched. And we're going to see the same thing against Alabama. Like they're going to blitz a lot. They're going to play aggressive coverages. They're not going to press you, but they're also not going to give a lot of help down the field. So they're going to try to push everything up. They didn't tackle particularly well in the secondary against Clemson. So there's just like going to be a million opportunities in this game for big plays for Alabama.
Yeah.
I would be surprised, all the stuff that worked against Ole Miss, especially in terms of like Judy getting free down the field out of the slot. Like that's something that I expect to be there a lot against.
So I went and found the 5-factor box score for that game for A&M and Clemson. Clemson averaged 70 yards per play, but their success rate was only 35.6%. And the average success rate is like 42%.
So it was really a product of big plays. And they were selling, they were selling out and they were being super aggressive to try to take care of Clemson's horizontal game. And that was effective. And, if I was Alabama, like I wouldn't be focused at all on that. Like I'm not trying to stretch the field horizontally. I'm not trying to do like screens or jet sweeps or anything. Not that they even do jet sweeps anymore this year, but I'm really trying to stay away from that. And I'm trying to really get vertical. And if they start over-commentating and really playing the vertical stuff, then I can kind of focus on my short game. But like I'm coming out and I'm saying like, you cannot stop me from beating you over the top. And that's what I'm going to do. So,
yeah,
I think that they're going to,
agreed.
Yeah. Mitch, do you have any more thoughts on sort of how the offensive thing is going to play out, or the offense defense matchup?
Yeah. It feels like another 50-point game.
Like in terms of
50? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think not only will the big plays be there in the pass, I would be surprised if they don't hit a few big runs as well.
I agree. I think they're going to hit a few big runs as well when sort of, Ole Miss not Ole Miss, when Texas A&M kind of gets like a little blitz crazy and some guys get out of their gaps and, Alabama springs a big play or two on the ground. So I think that's going to happen too. Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of quick drives, and that's kind of been Alabama's thing, right? Like these 3 or 4 play touchdown drives have become common for Alabama. So I think we're going to see some of that. I think they're going to blow them out. I think this is going to be an absolute rout.
Yeah. On that note, score predictions. So the spread. So let's see if I can find like an actual like sports book here.
I think I saw like 27 or something earlier.
I think it opened at like 26.5.
Okay.
Opened at 27 and the over is 61.5.
Okay. Over 61.5. I think it's gonna hit the over. Well, yeah, I would probably bet the over. You know, I wasn't too bold. I mean, I predicted them to cover against Ole Miss, but I sort of kept it within reason. I think I had like 45-20 or something. I'm not going to keep it within reason anymore. Not for this game. So I'm going to say, um, I'm going to say, uh, 52-7, Alabama.
I think I'll go with. I think Alabama maybe slips under 50 points for the first time this year. I'm going to go 49-10. So give me the cover, but the under.
Okay. I like it. I like it.
That's 7. Is that 7 made extra points? Are we 7 for 7 on?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
7 for 7 on extra points.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest stretch of the.
I'm in like 50 to like 13 range. I think 50
Okay.
10, 50 13.
Okay. Yeah, I really think that, you know, the thing that I could see in this game on both ends is I could see A&M making a couple plays, both on defense and on offense. You know, with Mon in terms of his ability to play outside the X's and O's and make sort of crazy plays. And then on defense with how aggressive they're going to be. Like, I could see them forcing a turnover or something.
Yeah.
So I could see like them making a couple big plays, and then that's it. I don't think they're going to be able to really line up and stop Alabama at all. And I don't think they're going to be able to really line up and move the ball efficiently on offense at all. So
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see their offense have a success rate like under 30% or something like that.
I think it's going to be bad. Like if as long as Alabama keeps Mon in the pocket, I think he's going to be uncomfortable there. I think they're going to do a good job about taking away his primary read, and then it's just going to be a mess for him. And but just stay in your lanes. Like that's the biggest thing. If Alabama just contains him and just keeps him from being great on his legs, then I just think that they're just not going to be a lot there for A&M.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see y'all next week, and roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.